globally from around mid 90s. So we've seen a lot of PPPs happening, and this itself was a change from how airports were dealt with. Earlier, airports were never looked at from the experience point of view and so on. And now we have about 30% of the total passenger traffic is passing through PPP airports, and out of 3,000, about 19% are PPP airports. So you can see how the numbers where private sector is coming into the airports is increasing. Now, the demand for air travel is going to increase nearly by 300% over the next decade or so. 300% is very huge, but air travel not just in the manner in which we understand air travel, but in also a very different paradigm that this is going to happen. So there is a lot of pressure on the public sector, which is the governments, to continue to expand the airports. PPPs in airports, generally because of very heavy capital expenditure, are long term. So 25 to 30 years contracts or even more, depending on how the investment is going to be. And this is fixed in terms of how the the performance will be, the standards are set, the expectations from the private sector, the expectations of the government, they're all set. And therefore, we are now looking at a situation where we believe that once, for instance, the Bombay airport has come in with its developmental plan for the next 20 or 30 years, or the Delhi airport, we will have the development going forward in the same manner. There'll be phase 1, there'll be phase 2, there'll be phase 3, and it will fit perfectly well into the plan. What we are seeing today is complete change in the manner in which numbers will have to be dealt with. So however large airports we may create and however many airports we may create, the numbers are likely to be very different from what we see today. Look at the UN Agenda 2030, which is also known as the Sustainable Development Goals. But one very big part of it is eradication of poverty as we see it or we know it. In India today, we have close to 300 million people who are poor. Now, it's a very large number. And above that, there'll be about 400 to 500 million people who are barely above poverty line, but they are not into what we would say a high consumption class. Now, as prosperity begins to kick in, the numbers which are pushed up are going to be very large in India, but as well as globally. If you look at Africa, you look at Latin America, if you look at even Southeast Asia, the number of people who are going to move into high consumption class is going to be exponential as the effort to fight poverty intensifies in the coming 2 or 3 decades. We are also seeing that there are huge scientific progress in terms of the replacement of fossil fuel. So till now, the air travel has been very much captive to the use of aviation fuel, which is quite expensive, which has been very costly. One of the largest chunks of the expenditure in air travel comes from fossil fuels. But with this changing, with new sources of energy being discovered, very soon we are likely to see the cost of energy falling drastically, making air travel even more affordable to people who for now are not in a position to travel. There is another thing that is beginning to happen, and I think this is something that we are not factoring at the moment, but which will completely change the manner in which airports have to be designed, which is the rapid change in the method of transportation, in terms of travel, in terms of the design and capabilities of vehicles. And I'm using the vehicles not in terms of in terms of cars, but those receptacles which carry people from one place to another. Look at the development of drones. So how drones are transforming now. You have personalized drones, but very quickly you might have very large drones which vertically take off and land in a manner where the spaces that we are looking at today may not be necessary. We are also seeing this entire paradigm shift in the manner in which there is now conception. Yesterday there was discussion about how tourism and industry and aviation sector is going to combine. But look at this entire concept which is emerging in terms of home to home experience, which is integration, a much closer and intense integration of multimodal transportation, where it becomes seamless to go from home through a multimodal transportation to airports, from airports to the next airport, from there to home, etc. This home-to-home experience becomes integrated. And therefore, the design of the airports will also have to take into account the seamless integration which is beginning to happen. I mean, I was quite surprised to see the latest innovation, global innovation prize going to one of the students from Stanford, who has started looking at what they say hyperloop hotels, where you sit in, when you are in your hotel, you will actually reach your destination without having to leave your room. I don't know how it would happen, though, but it appears to be there, out there in the horizon, and it is likely to happen someday. Now the question is, when we are going to have these kind of tectonic changes in the manner in which travel is going to happen, will these 30, 40, 50-year designed airports with very heavy capex to cater to only a certain type of travel, what would be the fate of these, and what would be the fate of investments that are made in it? What would be required to make these flexible in a manner that you can quickly redesign them again and again and again and again to be able to deal with this, what we say, I mean, in the real terms, future shock, which is going to come in. And therefore, this is the whole aspect of integrating, now not looking at airports or air travel as independent way of traveling, but to look at it as part of life and how it integrates into our lives is something that we will need to begin to look at and think while designing the public-private partnerships, where private sector puts in a lot of resource and expects returns over a period of time. So we now are looking at a situation where your issues of, for instance, public accountability will become, will have to be redefined in terms of the fact that your concession agreements would have to be very nimble-footed. You may need to have to renegotiate them again and again, not over 20 years, not over 25 years, maybe every 5 years, with the kind of changes which begin to happen. You will need to have structures which are built in a manner where you can very quickly dismantle them and transform the spaces to deal with the new changes which are happening, so that you are not grounded into it forever in steel and concrete, which you cannot remove. So these are some of the issues that the government will have to start looking at as to how to deal with this issue of having come into, having contracted an airport for 20 to 30 years. How do you deal with the moral hazard of changing the contract every 5 years without going back again for price discovery into the market? But if you did that for 5 years, nobody will invest. And these are critical questions which I think going forward we will have to be looking at. There is also going to be a much greater, today for instance, in a public-private partnership mode, the government is both working as a partner but is also a regulator. And when we are saying independent regulator, basically if you look at any of the regulations that are put in place, governments actually don't take their foot off outside, you know, they just still have a foot in the door in terms of being the regulator. Today also and yesterday we heard a lot of people saying, well, government will have to take a call, government will have to do regulation. Because they also enact laws, therefore what kind of powers the regulator would have, etc., are all determined by the government. Now when they are also an operator in a fluid situation of this nature, where they are also a revenue sharer in the revenues of the airport, maximization of revenue becomes an important aspect from the public finance point of view. We need to also see how it will play upon in terms of developmental of regulatory framework to deal with this dynamic changing situation, how the government's role will also change completely in the partnership that we are seeing, which is likely to emerge here. So in my opinion, going forward, we are going to see the universe of PPPs is going to become completely different from what we are seeing today. PPPs will become much more complex. They will not be as simple as we see them today, which are quite logical in the manner of their structures and formation. They will need to be much more dynamic. A new phenomena which I really see emerging already, but we are not so mindful of it at the moment, is the constantly shifting risk paradigm. The risk shifting from the sovereign to the private sector and private sector to the sovereign, which will continue to happen on account of not only technology change, but also another thing that we are seeing in the global economy, which is the cycles, the economic cycles of downturn and upturns are now, the period is shrinking. Earlier on, we would see crises emerge once in 20 years or once in 50 years and 20 years. So after the Great Depression in 30, you see only something happening after 30 to 35, 40 years. But now, every 5 years, we are being hit by an economic crisis or downturn for some reason or the other. Now, these cyclical downturns cannot be captured in a long-term contract which is fixed. And therefore, the risk will keep shifting from the sovereign to the private sector, from the private sector to the sovereign, and new instruments or new tools of analysis will have to be found to be able to deal with these challenges of not getting into a situation of moral hazard in terms of protection of public interest, but at the same time not getting caught in the rigidity, not to be able to deal with the changing situations. We will also see the need for newer and more sophisticated financial instruments for long-term financing of airports. We have, as we have seen in India 4 years ago, we had never thought that we would be able to come up with an instrument which has now become very popular and also very successful. In 2013, actually, we had started in the Finance Ministry to work on the concept of InvITs, the Infrastructure Business Trust, the investment trusts, which now have fructified. And now there is a lot more pooling of long-term investment coming in from investors who are not directly investing in the project, but investing in the derivative of the earnings of the project to be able to get long-term return, have easy exit and entry and exit from the project. Crowdfunding, going down to much larger tapping of other sources, and how to protect those. These are the issues that the governments will have to deal with. Of course, about the customer demand and satisfaction, and the alternate modes which will become more competing with the airlines in terms of travel, are going to be with the bullet trains becoming faster and going right into the heart of the city. It is already in some places there is a big challenge to the airlines from other modes of transport, and this is going to become even greater in times to come. So the entire experience will have to become more attractive to draw the customers. Of course, as I mentioned, there will be much greater synergy between different sectors. So now it is not going to be simply sector planning. How do you plan airports? The Google map does for India a whole mapping of India and says these are the places where you will have airports because there is more traffic and so on. That itself is not going to be important. What is going to be important is how you link it with other important sectors, whether it is industrial clusters, whether it is services, whether it is industry. All these will begin to play much greater role in the manner in which airports are looked at and designed. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think going forward, we are looking at very challenging but very exciting times, and much more deliberations should, in my opinion, take place on how we are going to deal with this completely changed paradigm, rather than how we are going to improve upon the existing way of doing PPPs. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayaram, for that enlightenment. Yes, you may please take your seat in the audience. We have Dr. Irfan Al-Hassani, Senior Economist and Editor-in-Chief, Dubai Economic Council. He will present a case study on recognizing PPP as a critical approach for sustainable Dubai's airport. Dr. Hassani.
Well, thank you very much. Distinguished guests, very good afternoon to all of you. So first of all, I'd like to thank you very much for your taking time to attend this very late session, I'm afraid. And late session always challenging in terms how to attract the audience and to interact with the presentation. However, I will strive to make it appealing and attractive. I will go direct to the point. But of course, it would be my great pleasure to hear from you. Any questions, any clarifications you need in any section of my presentation. Well, my presentation is about how to interconnect the topic of this event issue, which is the airport infrastructure development, with the PPP. PPP, I always call it, and as His Excellency, Mr. Shri, he presented an amazing presentation. And I heard from him that he consider it as paradigm shift. So correct, PPP is a paradigm shift, not just a microeconomic instrument in the hand of government to provide equality and efficiency. And instead, it is a revolution in the contemporary economic thought about the preferable role of the state in the economy, or about the ideal combination of public and private sectors in the economy. So please allow me to show you the structure of my presentation very quickly. In the beginning, I would try to recall what had been discussed yesterday and today about the airport industry, and also the use of PPP as a cost-effective manner to implement and to rehabilitate airports. Of course, I would take it from economic perspective. Then I would dive deeply into the core of this presentation, which is Dubai. I will try to showcase Dubai's experiences in airport industry, but of course with a special reference to the use of PPP, as I said, of course, and that would entails, showing the anatomy of Dubai's economy. Why? Because aviation, by the way, and especially airport, is just one chapter of the success story of Dubai. And it is an integral part of the overall ecosystem of Dubai's economy, as I will prove that in some statements, official statements, and agendas of Dubai. And then, of course, I would highlight the major projects carried out in terms of Dubai airports and aviation industry projects. And then I will try to conclude some critical takeaways, if you like, or critical lessons, if you like, that could be drawn from Dubai's experiences for the interest of any emerging PPP market, just like, for example, India. And then, of course, there will be Q&A, if you like. So let me start with, very quickly, background on the, aviation industry, and also, again, the use of PPP. Well, I think we all heard and understand from yesterday, also today, that airport plays a crucial role in connecting continents, governments, persons, friends, but in addition to the information, knowledge, and money, by the way, across skies. if you take it from economic perspective, of course, airport or, I mean, air transportation in general can, more to the development agenda. It could, create jobs, reducing unemployment, increase the wealth, and may create incomes, etc., and also attract FDIs. And in addition to the opportunities it provides to other related sectors, especially tourism. In Dubai, for example, governments and also experts, stakeholders usually link the aviation with the tourism, especially, Dubai is, classified as a tourist destination regionally and globally. Also, data suggests that, there is an increasing trend around the world, not only in the advanced economies, but also in the developing and emerging economies alike, to increase the capacity of airports to accommodate the increasing number of aircrafts, passengers, and visitors. And you just imagine, within 2 decades, the number of, for example, aircrafts around the world will be doubled. So that means we should double, unless you disagree with me, double the capacity of the airports in various phases, by the way, not only in terms, for example, the area, but also maybe the sophistication of the technology that's supposed to be used in the airports and how to handle, operations and cargo. Okay. So traditionally, the government is the single official provider and owner of the airport. But again, we become, hearing from here and there that there is a trend to give the private sector an opportunity to participate in airport infrastructure development industry in various angles, not only in terms of constructing airports, but as I will showcase, some services that, could be also provided by the private sector, by the way, within the airport industry. So that's the main objectives behind that. First of all, if you take it from financial perspective, is to, of course, to relieve the pressure on the public fund and to shoulder the private sector instead. But of course, in addition to the upgrading the infrastructure of the airport, again, in order to accommodate with an increasing number and a crowd of aircrafts and passengers. So now if I go to the main part of my presentation, which is Dubai's case study. Well, as stated earlier, Dubai's aviation industry, airports, Emirates Airlines, all these are just, chapters within the story of Dubai's economy. So I think it might be pertinent to give you very quick snapshots on Dubai's economy in order to see where is, the aviation industry is located within the Dubai's overall economic agenda. I think it makes sense, at least from economic perspective. So Dubai is one of the fastly growing economy in the world. And figures incredible, reflects this fact. For example, GDP growth rate has been increased remarkably between the 70s and 90s, about 6%, and between 90s to 2008, about 9%. Very few countries, to be honest, has arrived at that, tier. Even, and this is, I think, this is a very simple, a graph that depicts this incredible growth. There is no any decline witnessed in the GDP growth rate of Dubai over the last 3 or 4 decades, but only, to be honest, during the global financial crisis, which is very normal, because Japan, United States, and many advanced and even emerging, witness a slowdown, which is very normal. However, just imagine from the negative GDP growth rate during 2009, just 1 year next sharp, the GDP growth rate witnessed positive trend, and then continuously till now about 3% or 3.5. So incredible. Dubai, by the way, even surpassed the most fastly growing economies in the world. For example, Hong Kong and Singapore, before those two stated city economies, surpassed Dubai in the 70s and 80s. But now, over the last 2 or 3 decades, Dubai surpassed those two economies. And this is the anatomy of Dubai's economy. It, as you can see, Dubai's economy is very diversified. So you can't really believe that the reliance on the energy has been decreased rapidly from 55% during the 80s of last century to 2% nowadays. Just 2%, by the way. But that never means the energy sector has been shrunk. No, it is increased, by the way. But in relatively to other, out of the total GDP, it has been decreased for the favor of other non-oil sectors. For example, financial sector, tourism, logistics, among many others. So all these non-oil sectors contributed about more than 90 or 95%. Just imagine the diversification, diversity of Dubai's economy. Also, the population, by the way, increased rapidly over the last 2 decades, and that, of course, create internal demand, if you like, of course, in addition to the external demand coming from the tourists and importers from Dubai. So now we come to the aviation sector within the context of Dubai's economy I'm just presented. Well, the leader, UAE in general and Dubai in particular, by the way, I am here not representing the government of Dubai at all. I'm coming here individually. And even when I take permission from my department, I say I have tourist, a picnic for my family. That means this is a extremely individual invitation, and that's why I'm not representing. And by the way, Dubai doesn't need, by the way, representation just like a poor man like me. But this is a fact because I live in this city, in Dubai, for more than 20 years, and I work in the government of Dubai for more than 15 years, so I am very familiar with the developments, at least those incurred in aviation industry. So His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, Vice President, Prime Minister of the UAE, ruler of Dubai, he embraces a very visionary view, not only to have a wow airlines or airport, but to be honest, to turn out the city to be one of the most innovative city, one of the best city in everything, by the way. If you come to the tourism, he like it to be destination #1, and logistics, everything. But of course, airports has been received as very special and particular attention by the government. Why? As I think so. I think because it is the first, door of the country. So it is, it represents the overall performance of the economy, the governance, the political regime, everything. Just like the taxi, for me, when I visiting any country, of course, I can measure the country from the airport. For me, maybe I am mistaken, by the way. Maybe this is exaggeration, but this is my feeling, and you may agree with me. You can understand the vision of the government in terms of aviation from the one quote of His Highness, who said, we don't need to build an amazing or the global airport in the world, but we need to turn the city to be the global capital of aviation. So he has a comprehensive image about aviation. Not only it's the matter of how nice and beautiful or big the aircrafts. Instead, how does the aviation industry, the ecosystem around it, by the way. And I will show you that within the strategy of Dubai, in addition to the aircrafts and a nice building, but there is also, for example, duty-free. I don't know whether some of you, I am sure, visited Dubai before, and you know how amazing and incredible success story of duty-free. Not to mention, for example, the amenities and buildings around the airport. So again, airport or aviation industry in general is a part of Dubai's strategic plan, which is most recently launched, called Dubai Plan 2021. And the plan stipulates that Dubai is gonna be the destination #1. And of course, by destination #1, that means it should absolutely has, airport #1, cargo #1, maybe even, inside the city, transportation, roads, etc. And that's why the government take care of every single corner of the city, in addition, again, to the aviation. So the aviation ecosystem includes, in addition to the airports, Emirates Airlines and Dubai South. I don't know whether you hear it, Dubai South. This is a hub, the new city, a new aviation city, by the way, that encompasses, in addition to the airports, but also for Al Maktoum Airport. This is the second largest airport, and supposed to be the largest airport in the world ever over the next few years, by the way. So you will repeatedly hear, hopefully in the next few years, when you come to the largest airport in the world, or even the largest cargo airport, that would be synonymous to Al Maktoum International Airport, by the way, as announced officially by the government. So let me give you very quick snapshots on Dubai's aviation. By the way, in attachment with the Dubai Plan 2021, there is Dubai Strategic Industrial Strategy 2030. This is includes the major industry that will drive the future of Dubai's economy. And one of the strategic sector is aerospace or aviation. So just imagine that the attention, the interest of the government in terms of aviation is basically a part of their strategic plans. So the government, again, always link between the aviation and other tourists. They believe, for example, every 100 jobs created in aviation would, spearhead to, creating 160 jobs in other related sectors. Also, every, for example, 100 US dollar would create about 70 or 72 dollars. So there is a link between, and that's why I'd like to call it ecosystem instead of just airport or aviation. The aircrafts today's take off from Dubai to more than 270, maybe more than this, and Dubai's airports becomes the hub for passengers and visitors and tourists. And today, the capacity of Dubai's airport increased remarkably over the last few years. But now it is about 90, and it is projected to accommodate more than 100, especially during Dubai Expo 2020. So Dubai will host about will receive projected 25 million visitors. By the way, 25 is very huge figure. Don't compare it with India, because basically Dubai's population is 2 point something, just like one district of maybe Mumbai. However, but maybe the ambitions of the government and also the people is very big and exceed the number of, the size of population. So yeah, so these are some facts about the projects carried out over the last few years in Dubai's airport. For example, now Dubai, most recently, I don't know, maybe you hear it, especially the gentlemen or gentlewomen, they visited Dubai. Now Dubai, constructed Terminal 3, which is dedicated exclusively for Emirates Airlines. However, Dubai merged with Concord's, this is Iranian Airlines, and now the terminals has been increased, and also the capacity have been, not only the capacity of, the passengers, but also the cargo. Just imagine the increasing number of passengers passing through Dubai's airport, from 47 million in 2010 to about to about 89 or 90, almost 90 within 7 years. And it is projected to, as I said earlier, to reach 100 million. Of course, 100 million, if you divide it or over 2.5, so it would capture a huge amount of the number of passengers. Dubai, especially Dubai airports and airlines, has recorded record numbers in terms of winning very high profile awards and the prizes. Just cross section of them in 2015, Dubai is qualified or nominated as the world's busiest airport with 78 million passengers, and in 2013 Dubai airport and Emirates Airlines has been selected as the first as the best airlines in the world. Okay, so again, maybe I already talked somewhat about Al Maktoum Airport. This is supposed to be the not alternative airport to the Dubai's international airport, but the the supported one. So it is in far away a bit, by the way, from the center of Dubai, but now the Dubai's authorities provide very luxurious buses and cars to transport the passenger there, but the capacity again in terms of cargo and passenger has been increased, and it is supposed to accommodate to 160 million passengers per year. So this is very huge, of course, even by the way relative to the metropolitan cities airport, just like Heathrow and the like. So Emirates Airlines, this is the flagship of Dubai's aviation. It started, people told me, and also I Googled it, and I hear it from some officials in Dubai. The company started from just 2 aircrafts, hired from Pakistan, I think. I don't know. And then now the company has more than 246 aircrafts, including the giant aircrafts A380 and also a 777 Boeing. And Dubai, by the way, becomes the largest operator of these giant aircraft. So this is also a tendency, the new move in Dubai's aviation, which is not just we need to increase the number of aircrafts to accommodate the increasing passenger, but also we need the top niche and the latest technologies, the largest aircrafts, the more luxurious ones, in order to provide quality and amazing services. In addition to the Dubai's, so Emirates Airlines, there is low-cost flights called Dubai, Fly Dubai. This is, we call it, locally we call it economy. While, by the way, there is also economy class within Emirates Airlines, but we call it economy because it is cheap and it is very, demand and seasonal sensitive, prices. If there is more demand, by the way, the ticket will be increased, just like nowadays. But however, of course, it's much cheaper than Emirates Airlines. So these are twins, 2 airlines catering, Dubai's aviation. Well, there are many flagship projects have been carried out in Dubai, and the strategic plan 2020 made by the Dubai's Aviation Authority, and looking forward to create an inspiring environment for attracting the aviation, and also again to turn the city to be the hub of international aviation. Nowadays, more than 160 international airlines using Dubai's airports. I don't like to go, dive deeply into some, very technical and detailed figures, and especially most of you are very hungry, I'm afraid. So yeah, I'd just like to jump to some very important facts in relating to the main topic of this event, which is again the airport infrastructure development and the use of PPP. So, by the way, in addition to the aircrafts and buildings, everything, Dubai's government is very keen to bring about the latest technologies, and I'm sure some engineers here, people working in the airports, they are more familiar from me concerning, for example, performance-based navigation. I don't know whether you know it, and also dynamic airspace management. Those are the 2 latest, latest technologies and management they used in order to, for example, to rationalize, for example, the use of airspace, the runways, to increase the efficiency of airports. So Dubai also, and I think this might be one very critical lessons that could be drawn from Dubai, is that the issue is not only to increase the numbers. It's not only the absolute numbers, but also the quality, the sophistication, and of course the quality service to make all the passengers happy, and to turn it to seamless journeys. Dubai South, this is the new hub. This is the aviation city, by the way, not just airports. It includes, buildings, amenities, also academy for aviation. I don't know whether here in India there is academy for aviation. I don't know. And also there is, very special services provided for VIPs. Why? Because Dubai, just like, for example, I think, just like New Delhi or Mumbai, it's also a hub for VIPs and, rich people and businessmen or FDIs. So Dubai also, the government of Dubai also keen to provide a very top niche service and luxury for those people, at least for FDIs. So again, in order to be able to implement all these amazing projects, whether in terms of aircrafts, capacity, cargo, etc., of course, Dubai should, becomes to think seriously how to tap the private sector. Not only the private, financing, which is, by the way, very important nowadays, but also to harness the potentials of the private sector in terms of, again, the latest technology, smart technology, innovation. And for this reason, although very late, but never too late, in 2015, the Dubai government enacted the first of its kind dedicated PP law, which is very late, I know, but better than nothing. And that would pave the road for future, critical PP projects, not only, by the way, in aviation exclusively, but also in other sectors. So there are many good news since the enactment of the stated law have been put in place in Dubai's airport. For example, when I came to Mumbai 2 days ago, I used for the first time in my life, I use, the smart gate, and of course, many of you, I'm sure you know them, but that was the first experience in Dubai, by the way. I used the smart gate and just I insert my business card, UAE card, ID card, and then the door open, then I make the fingertips, and without having to see or to meet any staff there. There is no any staff. Just like my experience in Sydney last year, my friend said, look, Arfan, you will leave the airport without, passing by any staff, correct? I just scan the passport, and I hope that, the major airports here in this nice country will use such things. Not only for the foreigners in order to be excited, but also for the people. It's all about the people, as I always say, how to satisfy the end user, the people, the citizens, how to make their journey smooth, and how to be familiar using the airports, air transportation instead of buses, for example, which is one indicator of I think, social progress. In addition, there is also very smart. I think people specialists in IT, I think they know all these things. But for me, it is new for me. I am economist, and now there is a sophisticated the motion sensor system in the airport. There is a software uploaded in the mobile application, and that would monitor the movement of passengers. In the airport. If there is long queue, the staff will know instantly, and he can, give a solution for that one. So instead of asking one staff, oh, please, this is very long queue, is there any other alternative, for example, corridor or, queue? So the staff around the airport will know the problems and challenges encountered in the movement and the smoothness of, the smooth of movement of passengers or cargo maybe, and they will, jump to help and to facilitate the transit. Also, Dubai is very keen to be a environmentally friendly city, and that's why it becomes, using solar energy. And they said that would save a huge amount of energy that's equivalent to powering 235 houses, again, relative to the population of in Dubai. And in addition, instead of Wi-Fi, we use, there is something called Wow-Fi. Why? Because now Dubai's airport provide free access to the fastest internet ever in the world, ever. just, yeah, I use it, but I don't know. It is called WOW. And so very nice to say to my kids that this is not Wi-Fi, this is WOW-Fi, yeah? Okay? But this is, by the way, this is one, a critical or smart ideas or projects or developments happened in Dubai. So again, it's not only the matter of building the aircrafts, although they are the two very important components of aviation industry, but also the ecosystem and technology. However, in order to be able to make all these things, Dubai now, again, after the enacting PPP law, they become to engage, in contractual arrangement with the private sector. Of course, mostly, to be honest, international companies. And maybe this is also an opportunity for smart or IT or innovative, if you like, Indian companies also to engage with their with Dubai's aviation or airport authorities. And I know some Indian companies, not necessarily in the airport, but also engage in very important deals and contracts with the government, especially in smart, we have there in Dubai the smart city, smart city initiative, and also smart government, in order to, to upgrade the services provided by public services. Well, any lessons learned? I think among the critical lessons that could be drawn, if you agree with me, is in order to, again, to develop the aviation industry and to use PPP as a very cost-effective manner to implement these projects. First of all, we have to change to raise awareness, to enhance the PPP culture. Because there is sort of, to be honest, sort of reluctance. I recognize that in some departments. They don't used to engage in a very special contractual relationship with the private sector. They just needed traditional procurement, TP. So we need to change. So I think conducting a massive awareness campaign across departments and even a private sector would be very fruitful. Second, institutional arrangement. The jurisdictions active procuring agencies, Dubai Aviation Department should, build capacity in starting from, for example, PPP cells or PPP units, as you surely know. I think India and some jurisdictions active in PPP in India, they have such things. In Dubai, we don't have so far. So this is a lag. So we need to also, and also maybe we miss the issue of measuring the viability. In PPP context, as you're probably aware, there is something called viability. So I think every single official procuring agency, including Dubai's, for example, airport, should have that techniques to measure, to examine the viability. For example, the viability of risk allocation, financial framework, VFM, and the like. And also, Dubai lacking, by the way, deep financial markets. Why? Because, as you know, PPP usually implies privately financing schemes. So unless, I'm sure experts here in finance, they know this. So unless there is a deep financial markets and also capital debt markets, then it would be very difficult, to be honest, to sustain the PP projects, for the private sector, to meet the break-even point and also to exceed it, to make profits. I think it would be very challenging. So lessons learned, the governments, aviation authorities should be very passionate. There should be also investment in the infrastructure, also in institutional capacity building, enhanced regulatory legislative framework, and also there should be ongoing government initiatives. And I think this is very important. The government would not only, enact PPP law and then abide, and blind their eyes and just, go through the no. The government should be very flexible and free to mitigate the risk encountered. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Hassani. Ladies and gentlemen, several significant subjects were deliberated upon in this two-day conference. Numerous learnings, equal amount of takeaways. A report will be consolidated and will be shared with all the members. A paper will also be prepared and submitted to the ministry, and of course we'll be having a similar conference in the coming days. Thank you all especially for your cooperation as regards the changes in